Welcome to Darkly Lit, where we investigate the horror behind an unspeakable crime, only to discover that the cause is something unpredictable. Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun.
I am one of your hosts, Kayla King. I am joined by my husband, David King.
It was the monkey!
And our good friend, Sade.
Cheers.
Now, keep in mind, that is an inaccurate statement. The killer was an ape, not a monkey. Okay, get that right. Bad, David.
Way to give the spoilers ahead of time.
Hey,
Yeah.
When was this written? When was this written?
1841.
Boom. People have had nearly 200 years to get on our level.
Get on our level, scrubs. So, we are discussing the murders, or no, not the murders. I keep thinking
It should be murders.
Oh, no, it is murders.
It is murders. It's plural.
It is plural. The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allen Poe.
Who?
Yeah, it's just some nobody that no one's ever heard of.
Is this another like Electric Boner situation where we're just reading some story by like? No, I'm sorry.
Ha ha ha. No, this episode we'll be discussing the story, but also we're going to go a little in depth with Edgar Allan Poe as well, because after reading this, I completely forgot this is more of a detective story than it is a horror. I mean, there's some horrific parts that I want to talk about, but
I think the horrific part is just the mutilation that happens to the victims, and it's really just a detective story.
yeah,
Which is fine. It's nice if we I don't mind if we like say deviate away from horror now and again.
yeah.
I would still say it's horrific in its own right.
And then, but Edgar Allan Poe is basically a godfather of horror, or he has a position of power in in horror. I don't know what, like he's a duke or something. What would you?
I would say he's the king of American Gothic to a degree.
Yeah, I can
Think of that. He was,
That sounds
he's writing
pretty good.
essentially Gothic fiction, but from, he's an American writing Gothic fiction, which is something,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. So shall we give a summary first of what we just read?
So, Murders in the Rue Morgue is an interesting story in that it begins with a deep and long discussion about why it's important to think analytically, or how an analytical mind can figure things out. It really kind of sets the mood for our narrator, who says, I enjoyed that long-winded explanation, but let me explain why I gave you all that, because I have this friend, and his name's Dupont. Dupont and he meet in Paris, our narrator, who is never named, and they become good friends. And during their time together, Dupont illustrates a keen observational skills and analytical mind, which he demonstrates to his friend just before they happen to read in a very long newspaper article that two wealthy women, a mother and a daughter, were murdered in a very ghastly and inexplicable fashion on the fourth floor of their house in the Rue Morgue. The body of the daughter was found, strangled to death, and with the body partially stuck up a chimney. The other one found in a courtyard, so mutilated that the head fell off when they picked the body up. There's no one can figure out how the murderer got in or out, but Dupont, with his keen analytical skills, is on the case. He goes in to look at everything and puts together, just by observation, the murderer did get in through a window that people didn't notice. And secondly, the murderer was an orangutan. Now, that seems pretty far-fetched, but then when he puts the pieces together and brings in the supposed owner of the orangutan, who he manages to get in touch with, gets a confession out of him that the murderer was just a very angry escaped orangutan brought in from Borneo by a sailor.
Who just really wanted to learn how to be a barber.
Sweeney Todd was his inspiration,
But then again, Sweeney Todd was over in London, and this is in Paris, so he didn't have the best tutors here,
Oh yeah, we got Dupont going, oui, I'm just a Frenchman. No, okay. If any French listeners are listening, I am so sorry.
But yeah, that's basically it. Dupont figures it out because he's really good at noticing things and puts together the incredibly far-fetched solution that it is a freaking orangutan that commits the murders.
Now, Alan admitted, because we decided to ask Alan, okay, we're gonna read an Edgar Allan Poe story because Edgar Allan Poe stories are in the public domain, and since we're in the middle of a pandemic,
Not
uh,
everybody can get to a library or a bookstore.
let's make it accessible to everybody. We asked Alan, "What's your favorite Edgar Allan Poe story or poem?" And he said, "The Murders in Rue Morgue." And I can understand why. I can absolutely understand why it has an orangutan as a murderer. So that's um. But before we get into that, let's talk about Edgar Allan Poe. Who is Edgar Allan Poe? Well, he was born on January 19th in 1809 in Boston to actors. Both of his parents passed away before his third birthday. Buckle up. His life is very depressing.
Like, oh, really depressing. If you don't know Poe's story already.
He was taken in by a wealthy tobacco merchant named John Allen and his wife Frances in Richmond, Virginia. His brothers and or Poe's brothers and sisters went on to live with other families, which weird, but okay.
Cool, let's separate all the siblings.
hmm
You get a sibling, you get a sibling, you get a sibling.
Allen wanted to raise Poe to be a businessman, and Poe was like, "No, I want to be a poet, like my hero, Lord Byron." Yes, Lord Byron was his hero.
I was always more of a Coleridge person, but okay.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Poe attended the University of Virginia in 1826. However, Allen, being the jerk he is, sorry, when I refer to Allen, I'm referring to his father, John Allen,
His
or
adopted father.
his adopted father, John Allen, said, "Here's a third of what you need for school. Good luck." So Poe struggled to like pay off any debt that he had for schooling, and he would actually gamble to actually try to make up the money. And this is where his gambling addiction started to come into play. Due to the fact that he was in such poverty during this time, he had to drop out of school, and he went back to Richmond and sadly discovered that his sweetheart Elmira was now engaged to another man. It just gets worse. Jeez.
Write what you know, right?
Yeah. And this is all before he turns 18. By the time he's 18, he does publish his first book, Tamerlane, and decides to enlist in the United States Army because he wants to go on adventures. That was actually one of his goals. 2 years later, he entered the United States Military Academy at West Point.
Fun fact, some people claim that his ghost haunts West Point, but then again, a lot of people claim Poe's ghost haunts it. But I've heard stories say that they've seen Poe at West Point, so.
Which is interesting because he wasn't there that long. Like within the same year that he started, he was discharged. Okay, so there I went to like a bunch of different sources, and they one said he was kicked out, another said he was discharged honorably, another said that they had to force him out. And it seems like the main reason is because he lied about his age and his name. And it had something also to do with his Alan being a jerk.
I thought when he first enrolled was not so much for adventure, but for being for just the income that would come with it. But that his adopted father bought him out, like paid for him to be removed.
Oh,
And
okay.
then when he enrolled again for more schooling, uh he was let go because of a lack of attendance, but this is just me going off of vague details. It's been a very long time since I've like looked at
Yeah.
anything Poe. But yeah,
See that
I don't know the whole details. Essentially, he was there and then he got kicked out.
see the tricky part is I mean it's not really certain about that. Like I got my information from the Edgar Allan Poe Museum, which says that he was kicked out, and then I went to poets.org, which said he was discharged, and then there's another Poe website that says that he was discharged due to lying about his identity. The information isn't consistent. The point is, he's no longer there. He was not there that long.
Poe being discharged.
Yes. So Poe decides to move to Baltimore to meet with his father's family. And this is the introduction to his Aunt Clem, who became like a mother to him. And also the introduction to his cousin, Virginia.
Doesn't he also get mobbed by a cousin? Not well, robbed by a cousin.
He does. Yes, he was robbed by one of the terrible things that happens. That is, one of his cousins does rob him. So
But
Wow.
yeah,
yeah.
but sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there. But yes, let's get to Virginia because
Oh boy. So his cousin Virginia, they got married, which already is like a uncomfortable.
People marry their cousins all the time, but
Uh,
back then, but
so Poe was 27. She was 13.
mm,
Ew. Apparently, they had a happy marriage. Yeah.
okay.
I mean, they were in poverty for most of it. The funny part is, every single one of my resources has said, this man lived in poverty. He was always poor. He never made enough money. Like, that is the theme throughout his whole life. He always lived in poverty. So keep that in the back of your minds as I go through this.
Poor Poe.
Yes, literally poor. But he brought his Aunt Clem and Virginia to Richmond, and it was there that he started publishing his short stories and actually gained a editorial position at the Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. Oh, also forgot to mention. So at this time, also, Alan dies and he leaves Poe with nothing. However, he does leave money to his illegitimate child that he never met.
wow.
Alan is a dick. I feel bad because it's like we have our good friend Alan, and I'm not.
I want to take that out of context. Alan is a dick. If you want to take that out of context, sure. We don't actually mean it, but some people will.
He actually became well known through the messenger because of his reviews. So he would just be scathing and just like go into full details and say, I hate this. And he would attack not only the author's work, but also the author themselves. And this actually led to eventually a opposition with a Rufus Griswold. That's a story in its own right.
Oh
I if
yeah.
I don't have enough time to get into their feuds. That's just a whole other can of worms. But eventually, his short stories actually did bring him some acclaim. He established himself as a writer and a poet and an editor. And actually, his story, The Raven, was probably his most popular story. Everybody was like, "Oh, have you heard The Raven? It's so great." He even moved to New York for a short period, and it was there he would edit a number of literary journals, including the Burton's Gentleman's Magazine. Okay, so the reason I'm going to say the Burton's Gentleman's Magazine is important is because this magazine eventually becomes Graham's Ladies and Gentlemen's Magazine, and that's where the Murders in the Rue Morgue is originally published. 1847, his wife passes away from tuberculosis and he snaps. I mean, already he was dealing with alcoholism and having a gambling addiction, but he really falls into a depression and just spirals. On October 3rd, 1849, he was found in Baltimore in a state of semi consciousness. No one knows why he went to Baltimore. He actually wasn't supposed to go there, but he did. And 4 days later, he died, and it is said that he died of acute congestion of the brain. There's other evidence that says otherwise, like other evidence that says that he may have also died from rabies, but we will get into that later on because one of our questions has to do with his death, and I do find that fascinating. So until then, how should we start? I guess what's your guys' relationship with Edgar Allan Poe in terms of growing up with him? Or his stories, not him as a person, of course.
Uh, uh,
Oh yeah, me and Poe went to the same grade school, and he pushed me off the swing.
That jerk.
Poe was in a perpetual bad mood back in the early 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
For me, regrettably, I haven't read much Poe since I was in school, and we did our required reading of Poe. So I read, obviously, The Raven and The Telltale Heart, but it also has been quite a long time, and I should reread those now as an adult, but I haven't gotten around to it.
No, I understand. I was forced to read those same short stories when I was in school, but I actually did like them. And every once in a while, I would reread The Telltale Heart for my own enjoyment. I think out of all of his poems, The Telltale Heart is the most fascinating to me, just because it is from the point of view of someone that's like clearly insane or not in his right mind and is
Hmm.
doing something horrific and trying to basically convince the readers, I assure you, I'm not mad. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you're not. You're just a sociopath. But anyway,
I
but
feel like it's more a really wonderful portrayal of just what paranoia and guilt can do to the mind.
oh,
Oh yeah,
absolutely. In terms of other short stories, like I did read The Fall of the House of Usher, which is fairly interesting.
I
But
really like that one.
yeah, I think I'm more a fan of his poems though. I like him in short bursts than I do in longer bursts. I think he's a better poet.
That's fair. I think some of his short stories are better than others. I mean, and they've had such a big influence. One of the collections of books I have on Poe's short stories, I actually shared with Kayla earlier, has an introduction written by Vincent Price. Um, and Price said that he thinks Poe's stories are, great on horrific detail, but short on plot.
Actually, yeah, that's the best way to describe him. And then I think it's the same case here too with the murders in
Mm,
Rue Morgue.
I would
yeah.
agree, but then again, I don't know. I think, like, if I was going to cite one of my favorite Poe short stories, or one that really stuck with me, it's the Black Cat. I really like the Black Cat as a short story. Just the it's a very Telltale Heart kind of story, very
Hmm.
similar, but this one involves a cat being the giveaway instead of a supernatural heartbeat, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
And plus, it's a very shocking spin around. Where it's just, and I planted the axe in her brain is a line that sticks with me.
It's a good line. Um, yeah, I mean, I there's still some short stories that I've never read. I had never read The Murders in the Rue Morgue before this.
Me neither. I'd read the Purloined Letter, so I was familiar with Dupont as a character. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, by the way. It says Dupin, but I know it's in the French, and I've heard like a college professor I know pronounce it Dupont, which I think is the appropriate pronunciation for it. But I could kind of like it's not like Lupin the Third. It's not Lupin, it's Lupin the Third. It's
Hmm.
Dupont.
We can. I mean, I don't mind calling him Dupont. I mean, I don't know how it's pronounced, so
Dupont.
is it?
I'm gonna keep referring to him as Dupont though.
That sounds that would be my best guess too.
Yeah. So the reason, but I've read the Purloined Letter, which was a bit of a slog for me because unlike the other letters, this one has the horrific element, but the Purloined Letter is purely detective fiction, and it's just Dupont showing off how smart he is and figuring all this stuff out. So I am completely familiar with this character who showed up in a few of Poe's mystery fiction, and should it be important to point out was a huge inspiration to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle for
Uh,
Sherlock
I
Holmes.
actually have a quote on it. So, Poe is credited as inventing the modern detective story, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle said this: "Where was the detective story until Poe breathed the breath of life into it?" So, Arthur
Hmm.
Conan Doyle admitted that, yeah, Poe was an inspiration to him.
And it's not even just Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes himself mentions Dupin in one of Conan Doyle's short stories. Watson brings it up to him and mentions that he's very much like Dupin. And Holmes, in a great egotistical bit, basically says, "What I do makes what Dupin does look like child's play," or something to that effect. I'm quoting this from memory, or this bit from memory, but it always cracked me up to see Dupin brought up and then laid low by Sherlock Holmes. So
I think I'm not gonna lie. The first part of this is such a slog
did
through.
you kind of glaze through your way through it, admittedly?
I tried to read it and I was like, "Oh," I think my mind started to glaze first, and then I just kind of over the rest of it. But once we got into the story, I was like, "Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
awake
and
now."
that's how I was too. Yeah, like the analytical part. I'm like, oh god, I just forgot words, and I had to go back and reread them, and it's still not stick. It still does not stick for me. The story begins as soon as Dupont inserts and they're reading the newspaper.
Right. I think what's interesting is for the very first part was the hardest because it's just it's like an essay on analytical thinking, you know? And I understand that at the time we didn't have a character quite like this, or at least not one in that was in the popular public consciousness like this. So this is Poe setting up. This is why this is important because I needed to be explained that some people need to think like this, and it's basically a way to introduce how Dupont as a character thinks. Because clearly our narrator is a fanboy of his best friend and bosom buddy Dupont, who he lives with, by the way, for a spell in a decaying Gothic mansion in Paris. And during the day, they keep the blinds closed and they either like play music or read poetry to each other or just have long conversations. And then at night, they go out into the city together and just walk around and keep having conversations. These two have the best bromance and even possibly romance, in my opinion.
No, David,
I don't need to say anything because you guys know what I'm thinking. So
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That crossed my mind when they went. It totally crossed my mind when they. I understand that things were different. Different. It didn't send the same signals, but the idea of them walking arm in arm through Paris together, because it's literally described that they walk arm in arm. At the very least, I love the friendship that they have. That's a fun detail. I know exactly what Sade is thinking. And I accept that too.
But as the reader, we are more than welcome to put our interpretation to it. That's the idea. We, as readers, we decide how we want to interpret the story, and that's how it affects us. So, yes, I would love to read them as a gay couple. This gives them more personality than I'm just an analytical individual. No.
The narrator is not really a character, though. He's just there to be our window to Dupont. So
I don't care. I want to make him gay.
No, that's fine.
But
what do we know about our narrator?
Nothing. Except
he's rich, or he has enough money to like apparently care for both of them, and he also likes books. He's into the same things Dupont is. At least, he's into reading fiction and collecting rare tomes.
He wrote a whole story about that was basically a love letter to Dupont and his ability to think analytically.
I need to tell you all about my friend who is amazing. Honestly, bravo to our nameless narrator. But I think the thing that amuses me is there's Gothic elements to the story, but it's just funny that we have that random detail of they bought a decrepit old mansion and they live in a Gothic fashion where during the day they just keep everything closed up and dark and they barely light any tapers. They refer to them as tapers, and then they just spend the day brooding in the shadows, and then at night they go out like vampires.
I'm gonna sound like an idiot, and I'll probably cut this out. Is that in the story? Did I miss that?
Yeah, it's in the story.
Fuck me. Okay.
It's okay.
I can't believe I missed.
That's probably the part you glossed. That was.
Oh no, it was hard because it's like there's that turnaround as soon as it gets to the newspaper. Like my brain was like on fire. There's that in between where he's like, "Oh, you're thinking about this individual. How did you know?" And it's a back and forth. I completely glossed over to some of those details, and then again it's the slog of analytical and trying to comprehend that, not doing a very good job. Then there's
it was probably incredibly gripping back in the 1800s.
I mean, the language is so different now. It would be the way they would describe us in a simple detail of like, oh, they just hang out a lot together. It could be easily missed if we're not used to that language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it almost seems like all of this is just a setup so we know it's established who Dupont is and how he thinks before we get to the longest 2 newspaper articles ever written.
Also, by the way, the descriptions of the murders are beautiful, but what newspaper posts such gruesome details?
Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that much because, hey, the papers would want to post the most sensational news they could, so people would want to buy them and read them, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like in this period. So it's not that much of a stretch to me, personally.
True, it's 1841, so.
So I have Henry, who researches. Henry is one of my fellow hosts on the Witching, known as Ophelia. They do a lot of research into a variety of topics, many of which take a century and further back, and so they often are like, check out this newspaper from fucking 18 whatever, and like what they put in there, and it's like, holy fuck, they put that in the papers. So
Mhm.
yeah, I know, I totally buy that they wouldn't put all these crazy details of this terrible murder in the paper.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, I like this.
Yeah. But, my question is, do you buy the length of it being in the paper? Because it gets in depth, and it goes on for pages and pages.
I don't know, okay, about the length. 'Cause you also have to think about, like, okay, how much time it took, printing then.
Hmm.
So who knows?
Mhm.
Maybe the length is a little much, but then maybe there were lengthier stories because they only had so many to put in the paper. I don't know. I don't
I,
know. Who knows? It's fiction, so I'm not gonna question it too
Yeah,
much.
not too much.
I mean, I can imagine this would be also kind of a front page news type of story. It is a horrific murder that
Yeah,
happened.
if it's like the day's like major headline, then I feel like they would give it more retail space than some of the other stories.
Oh, yeah. By the way, another question. This is one I had to pose to you. Before you read the story or knew about the story, did you assume that when they said the Rue Morgue, that it was actually going to be the murders took place in a morgue?
I thought something was gonna happen or end up at a morgue.
Yeah, but no, it turns out the Rue Morgue is just a neighborhood area.
I was a bit
Huh.
I was a bit disappointed. I thought it was going to be at a morgue as well. I thought we are going to see dead people
Can I
and
ask you guys? Okay, you guys had read the story prior, but when you first
I
read it
hadn't
the first.
actually.
neither of us had read it before this.
Oh, okay. So it's just Alan suggested it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you guys know the ending was about a orangutan? Because
Yes,
I didn't.
I did.
I didn't until I went to go find the story, and then it was like picture of an orangutan, and I was like, oh, he's the killer. We're spoiling it. So I wish I had read the story without knowing that, because then I wonder how that would affect my enjoyment of the story. Because I was just kind of like, I don't know. I feel like that ruined it for me a little bit.
I kind of wish I hadn't had it spoiled for me.
Yeah, because the fun about a mystery, a detective story, is like how it like the reveal of the culprit, Haniwa, okay, sorry, I like the Japanese ones a lot. Um, uh, and then like just how all the pieces fall together, and we had a lot of that. The whole part, essentially, it was after the newspaper articles. It was all just like, here's how it happened, and here's what they missed, and blah blah blah, and like that's the fun part.
Yep.
But when you already know the end, it's like, eh.
Mm,
Mhm.
So that was a bummer.
mm,
So I'm
I'm
like
sorry.
angry at whoever put out the story with a freaking picture of the orangutan on the cover. Anyway,
Yeah, I
They're like I said, they just seem thoroughly convinced that everybody else, like, they're like, this is the big selling point of this, is that there's a killer orangutan, and it's like, but no, leave that. You got to leave that. Like, maybe some, like, people like us who didn't read the story in 1846.
I know everyone's we were like spoilers. Here's some spoilers, and now we're complaining about being spoilers after we spoiled it in the
Well,
beginning.
again, we're presuming that people who listen to this podcast have read the story with us.
I
So
actually, interesting enough, Bringer did not know reading it what it was. So Bringer actually said, "Oh, I just read it. I had no idea it was going to be an ape." Actually, so the spelling for orangutan is different. In the short story, it's spelled like orang otang. Like it's a
Orangutan, something
yeah.
I don't
So
know.
when he read it, he's like, "What is this?" And then he's like, "Oh, it's an ape." It's an yeah. It clicked for him, but he didn't know what to expect. So that I think he probably enjoyed it more than we did. I forgot how it was spoiled for me. I want to say I want to say it was Knots, like when they did Nevermore, or they were talking about Nevermore.
oh yeah, so not Scary Farm had a maze for several years called Forevermore that was Poe themed.
Forevermore, that's it.
Yeah, it was really cool. The whole premise was that there was a serial killer going around killing people by recreating scenes from Poe's stories. So one of the rooms that you did go through was inspired by murders in the Rue Morgue, and you actually see a body dangling out of a chimney in that part, which is pretty cool. I don't remember if you see an orangutan though. I think you might, but I don't
How do
know.
you throw? Oh, 'cause this was one thing that bothered me is like, how do you throw? Because her head was down, pointing down, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
How do you throw a body up unless you like are breaking the limbs or dislocating like joints as you shove it up the chimney?
What I originally thought was happening, since I knew it was an orangutan from the beginning, is like, oh, he came through the chimney somehow and was trying
Or
to take
like,
the body with it. The
yeah, that's
orangutan
what
was
I
trying to take
thought
the body
too.
with it. So
That was my thought as well. Like that. Oh, it's a small chimney, so a human couldn't fit, but perhaps orangutan could fit because they're
Orangutans
smaller.
are really big, though.
They
They
can, but they also have, a lot more dexterity in their limbs and the ability to
Mhm.
climb sheer surfaces. So like, I don't know.
I don't know how it was stuffed up a chimney.
There's a lot. Okay, to be fair, there's a lot of things. I think we in our modern age understand orangutans a lot better than they did in the 1800s
Oh
because
yeah.
there's a lot of things this orangutan does that I don't think orangutans would do,
hmm
Like, try to shave.
Yes.
and like viciously murder people for no other reason,
Ki-
for no reason.
I have to admit, the way so I knew it was going to be orangutan. I did not know how gruesome the murders were going to be described. I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." Like this like even they even described this like her head was near it seemed to be cut off, but even when she was lifted, her head completely fell off. I'm like, that's good. I'm loving this. And then it's like they look and then they see her head dangling from the inside of a chimney. I'm like, oh, that's so good.
There are even little details that are really skeevy, like when they find the clumps of hair that have clearly been ripped from her scalp.
Yeah.
Like, yeesh.
It's just yeah, like the gruesome descriptions of these murders is just that's good shit.
I also like how when you do start putting the details together, it all does come together because it doesn't like you start to wonder about some of the specifics, like why if they were all upstairs and they heard the screaming, how did the body of the mother end up in the courtyard below? And it turns out the body just fell through the window, like it was thrown through the window by the orangutan. Because
Mhm.
the one thing that Dupont points is that even though it looks like it's nailed shut, the nail is actually like broken at the top. So even though you can still see the fastening, it's actually not connected. The nail is broken underneath it. So it was
Mhm.
like this. There's some weird specific details about windows, window shutters, and a lightning rod, and um, it's interesting.
Mhm.
But still, the whole thing about the orangutan, I can accept it in the fiction, but based on a lot of facts that I know, yeah, orangutan would not freak out that much or be, I don't know if necessarily strong enough to just straight up murder someone. I know they can be pretty big and pretty strong, but and I know that it's not wise to mess with an angry orangutan, but to like kill two people that viciously, that seems like a stretch.
If it was provoked, it could do a lot of damage because they are
Maybe.
incredibly strong.
Mhm. And that is true. The orangutans are very strong and there has been horror stories of if you do something just like to scare an animal, they will do something gruesome and gory without
Right.
intending to. Again, it's like the Siegfried and Roy situation with the tiger.
Right, right. I just have it's a little trickier for me. Like I again back then it's a lot more people would think a lot more like, oh, a savage beast from the distant jungles, this ape, this beast, this brute. They keep referring to the orangutan by a lot of very brutish terms, you know?
hmm
And also, hit the person who captured the orangutan, the sailor, was definitely not very kind to it because he whipped it.
Oh yeah,
So of
And what,
course he
kept it in a
provoked it,
closet, I think?
kept it in a closet and whipped it because he was intending to sell it, but then it wanted to imitate him shaving. That's why it had a razor.
I'm surprised the sailor didn't die. I'm genuinely surprised.
Yeah, me too. By the way, by the end of the story, is the orangutan still at large, or did it get captured? Because I think
Uh, DuPont says something like, "Oh, we have it here," but we're not sure if he was actually lying about that.
Dupont set up the meeting,
Yeah, he set up the meeting.
but he didn't actually have the orangutan, did he? I get a little bit lost in
I
the
don't
language
think
of what
he
happened
did.
there.
He does tell the sailor, "Yeah, we have it at this location because we can't keep it here. You can pick him up there tomorrow." So, but I don't. I got the implication that he might have been lying about
I got
that. To
that
be
too. If you read it more closely than we did, forgive our ignorance on this point. It's just I'm trying to remember if by
yeah,
the end of the story if it's mentioned that the orangutan is caught or if it's still at large.
I
in my defense, I read it earlier today while waiting for Brad to proof. So,
Fair enough.
honestly, it's hard to say because I feel like the main reason Dupont went into it is because his friend. We don't even know why his friend was arrested for this crime. He just was.
He had some sort of connection with the ladies.
Yes,
the
but
ladies or maybe the money, 'cause the police were like, "Well, the motive has to be the money that wasn't even taken."
Yeah.
even nothing was connecting him to being there at the murders or anything. It's just the money.
It's the closest thing they could get, so they, like, arrested him, and they were holding him until they could prove it, I guess. So
And the whole idea is, oh, Dupont owes him a favor, but you can tell Dupont wants to do this. Like, this sounds like a fun mystery to solve. Let's do
I get to
he
this.
is very
outsmart
much
the cops, let's go.
you can so tell that this is the proto Sherlock Holmes, you know?
Hmm.
I think Dupin is, definitely started it, but I feel like Arthur Conan Doyle, pushed it forward more for sure and made, Holmes a more interesting character. I don't think there's anything wrong with Dupin as a detective. I just think that there's not a lot going for him as a character. Again, great on details in some places, but short on plot. We really don't learn that much about Dupont other than that he's kind of poor, comes from a bad family situation, and really, really into collecting old books and reading and the arts. Holmes, on the other hand, has a lot of stuff going for him, including flaws like he plays the violin, he's on drugs, just like
Yeah,
he's got an ego.
Sherlock has an actual personality and other details that we can connect to. Where this is straight A. The only thing we know about Dupont mainly is he's a Frenchman and he is known for his analytical mind, and we're seeing his analytical mind at work.
Yeah.
We don't know much else about his personality other
Mhm.
than this is how he thinks.
But yeah, I don't know if is there much more to say about this one? I mean, they solve it, and then the story's just kind of over.
Yeah.
I didn't I liked it still. I still like the story. It's just that I'm kind of like, okay, I definitely can see how this had an influence, and the parts that are memorable are just the ideas that Poe implements, especially with the murders themselves. The method of
Mhm.
the mystery itself is interesting. Seeing how it's broken down and figured out is interesting.
Mhm.
Doesn't really feel like you can solve it along with. It's like you could pick up details and maybe form your own conclusions in a lot of detective fiction or mystery fiction that you read
Yeah.
later, but I feel like, we're just kind of sitting back and letting Dupont tell us
It
everything.
yeah, I think this is the thing to take away from this is that it's the blueprint of the detective story, and
Right.
that's what you gotta admire it for. Because definitely in more modern detective stories, part of the appeal is trying to figure out the mystery before it's revealed to you by the
Yeah.
detective. Um, like, Alan and I watched Knives Out or
Oh,
something not that
nice.
long ago, and that was a great fun mystery, and we're both like, "Oh, it's this, that," along the way. That is such an appeal for detective stories, and this story did not have any of that. We are literally just having it explained to us the whole time, and there's no way for us to kinda, like, try and guess ahead. We can try, it's just the leaps are so yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it's the blueprint and admire it for that. And I'm glad that we got things like Sherlock and other things and like um I'm thinking of Conan. Um,
Detective, super detective
but
Conan.
yeah, it's not my favorite Poe
Same. It's
story.
not.
Same.
But I appreciate it for what it is and for what it's brought us, and it wasn't even with the whole twist revealed, it was still fun being like, "Okay, well, how did this happen now that I know
Yeah.
what it was?"
So I
You
actually
know?
I found the line.
So
There is one line, and it's a very quick line. It says, "It was subsequently caught by the owner himself, who obtained it for a very large sum at the Jardin de Plantes."
So then, yeah, that's it.
That's
Vicious
it.
orangutan is just caught, and then it's out of the story.
Yeah, it's one sentence, and then after that is Le Bon was released, and then Dupont goes on and saying like, "Look how awesome I am," and the police have to admit that I am awesome.
Dupont the third.
But yeah,
You're
I'm with
That's my anime reference. I keep going to this one.
I'm with both of you. It's not my favorite Poe story, and there's actually some more interesting ones. Like I think the system of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather is a much more interesting story to me too
Mm.
than this one. But I do appreciate the fact that yes, this was the story that began the whole, oh yeah, detectives can be analytical, and this leads into Sherlock Holmes, which then inspires even better detective stories.
Yep.
And I do appreciate that. I mean, with this possibly also inspired Agatha Christie, who I also think is a really good mystery writer as well. So
Hmm. Actually, here's a question I just thought of. Do you think Poe is better known for his horror fiction than his detective fiction? But would you say the in this way, when you think about it, his detective fiction had a greater impact on fiction than maybe even his horror did?
no. I think they I think
When I say greater impact, I mean, like, think about all the things it bled into as a result. Like,
Mhm.
if Poe hadn't written Dupin, then maybe Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wouldn't have gotten Sherlock the way he did, and so many people were inspired by Sherlock. So, like, it's not. I don't want to rule out how important it is that Poe wrote this kind of mystery fiction, this detective story,
mhm.
and that this is the springboard. In that essence, that is almost more important than the stuff he did for horror.
I
Or
don't
would you say they're both kind of equal, or one is greater?
I would say they're equally important, and they just
Mhm.
affected literature in different ways. With the detective stories, it was definitely a domino effect, and, like, if this was as big as an inspiration to Conan Doyle as we believe it is, then yeah, that was definitely a domino effect that led to this whole beautiful genre. On a separate in a separate little chain of dominoes, I think it also affected horror.
Yes.
Um,
yeah.
so,
Let
I mean, this man deserved a better death than what he
Oh my
got.
god, he did.
So yeah, because let's not forget this is also the same man who, for horror, went from the point of view of the madman, and
Right.
um,
Mm.
or the point of view from the individuals who would normally be the villains, and this inspired a lot more horror stories just as well. Like I would say without the Raven or the Telltale Heart, we wouldn't have like Stephen King novels, which I know some people would be like, "Oh God," but
Hmm.
um, but or we wouldn't have I'm trying to go through who would be after um who would have been after Edgar Allan in terms of horror.
Oh, there's
Well,
plenty.
I mean, I could imagine that H.P. Lovecraft was probably inspired by him as
Oh
well.
yeah. Oh yeah. You look at Lovecraft's writing, and it's got that same almost kind of flowery but also analytical angle to it.
Hmm.
And how much of Lovecraft stuff deals with madness
Oh,
when you think about
absolutely.
it. Obviously the madness is coming from an outside source because of the eldritch part of it. Things man was not meant to know. But whereas Poe's madness, the madness of Poe's characters tends to come from within. You can see them there's usually an outside influence. Telltale Heart, it's the old man's eye. They always blame something on the outside for their madness, but you can see right through the veneer. They are, I mean, in just saying, it's important to acknowledge he was influential in more ways than just horror. And I think that's what Murders in the Rue Morgue helps illustrate.
Same with like Alfred Hitchcock. Actually, I found a quote. It's Alfred Hitchcock once said, "It's because I liked Edgar Allan Poe's stories so much that I began to make suspense films."
Yeah. I mean, Vincent Price, even, like I said, I read this introduction by Price, and Price says he owes Poe a lot for, giving him these horrific things to play. He loved reading Poe, when he was younger, and then he gets to play parts in adaptations of Poe's work. And a lot of that introduction is describing what it was like to be a part of these films that have to translate what Poe did from the page into a visual medium, because you don't have the flowery prose. You need the imagery that he would sum up in words on the screen. And he would
Mhm.
talk about how each of the film parts of film production would do that. It's a really fascinating introduction by Vincent Price, actually, for this collection. So,
We have a couple questions. I think I'll start with Bringer of Lighters question because we keep hinting at this, and I feel like I probably should bring this up. Do you think Poe died from rabies or alcoholism? And I mean, we could open it up to not just rabies and
there's a
alcoholism.
lot of theories.
Yeah, Poe was found on the ground.
He was found in a gutter,
Yeah.
near a polling station, and in, like, clothes that were not his, and, like, these really shabby clothes. And I know we were talking about how Poe was in poverty for the most of his life, but after The Raven was published, like, nationwide in newspapers, he was actually starting to live comfortably. And when he had the money up to his death, he actually dressed pretty nicely. Um, so we know those weren't his clothes. I'm just gonna throw my theory out and then let you guys.
All right.
So there was this thing called cooping back in the 19th century, and
Yep.
that's just what I think it killed him because I don't think it was alcoholism. There might have been some alcohol involved, but I don't think it was alcoholism because we didn't mention it in his bio summary. But he actually, after the death of Virginia, I'm not sure how long to after, but he did get back together with his original fiance who was going to marry somebody else. I don't know what
Yes.
happened there if that didn't work out, but he did go back to Elmira or whatever her name was.
Hmm.
And they were engaged. And I think he was returning from Philadelphia on
Yes.
business via
Hmm.
train, and for some reason got off in Baltimore where he was found. So he had good reason to not be drinking. He was also a vocal supporter of the temperance movement. So I don't think it was him that went back to drinking. Um, when what cooping is at the time there were these gangs that would just pretty much kidnap you and force you to vote for their candidates, and they would put you in different outfits and make you vote, and then they just toss you aside once they were done with you. And a lot of polling stations back then were in bars, and you could vote and they would give you a drink. So he was probably drinking because they were making him vote. And then there's stuff about how Poe's doctor had in fact told him that he needed to stop drinking, and this is part of the reason why he was probably so supportive of the temps movement, is that if he kept drinking, it's reported that he didn't handle his alcohol too well. Like one glass of wine and he was fucking drunk.
Hmm.
Um, and one of his siblings had similar reactions to alcohol, so that might have been hereditary. And that's partly maybe why he started drinking. But there was also, I remember hearing that his doctor told him, you might have something in your brain that is, it's going to kill you if you drink again too much, if you keep drinking. So I think it was partly the being forced around and drinking and then being tossed out like trash once they were done with him that really killed him. That's my theory. Cooping. So, damn. Politics. Fuck politics, man.
I've heard that theory before, but I think you explain it in a way that makes a lot of sense and refreshes my memory on that one. That's the one I ascribe to, honestly.
Yeah, that's where I am too. I also had to like bug Henry and be like, "Hey, what's your theory on Poe's death?" And they're like, "That one thing where they make you vote, cooping." Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And
Wanted.
it still doesn't quite explain why he was in Baltimore unless he was shanghaied while on the train or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know that
We'll
part.
never know all the details, unfortunately, but that is a good theory. So
Mm.
technically, you could say alcoholism led to his death, but it wasn't necessarily his fault.
Hmm.
If the cooping theory is the sort of the press ganging, the cooping is to be
Mhm.
believed.
I do believe, again, as you mentioned with cooping, you're forced and it's violent and it could lead to death. And he probably in the gutter was probably passed out, and this could have led to anything. Like he hit his head due to the violence. It could have been caused by the people who did the cooping, or maybe he did have rabies. He could have been passed out in a gutter and a dog bit him, or whatever, or a rat. It's
It's Baltimore in that
it's
period.
Baltimore.
It's Baltimore.
But
I've never been to Baltimore. I don't know for sure.
I
Sorry if we're insulting anyone from Baltimore, but we've heard people from Baltimore say how shitty parts of Baltimore are.
I didn't know about the whole cooping thing. All I knew was that he was found in a gutter. I didn't realize he had different clothes. I'm glad you brought that to my attention,
Mm.
Save. Again, the information I received was just mini biographies from .org sites of Edgar Allan Poe. And I think their attempt was just to say, here's a basic information, which I was just trying to do, get basic information. The fact that cooping could have been a part of that just makes it even more fascinating and just horrific.
How ironic that his death is kind of an unsolvable mystery.
Yeah.
Where's Dupont when you need him? He needs to solve the death of his creator.
I don't know what the rabies theories is, but I'm gonna be in the cooping. That's where I'll
I mean,
put
I
my.
That's my favorite
That's where
theory
I'll
too,
throw
though.
my, yeah.
That's one of mine. I remember hearing about that not that long ago and me being like, "Oh, that's actually really cool."
well,
So,
see, the whole rabies thing was that medical practitioners had reopened his case and saw that Poe may have been suffering from rabies.
hmm.
And again, if you're thrown into a gutter, passed out with
Shabby clothes.
shabby clothes, and there's like just random wild animals out, like it could be more than possible that he could have been bit. Like I think the rabies theory could have gone hand in hand with cooping, possibly, but or whatever. But the other thing is too, other medical practitioners and historians says, well, he could have died of cholera or the
I mean,
whole.
he could have died of a lot of things, syphilis even. I know
Mhm.
that reportedly he was uh, having delusions while in the hospital bed because he was like speaking to specters of whatnot. Um, I I partly think it was the cooping, and he had some kind of brain lesion or tumor that was being affected because of the alcohol, and maybe that's why he was delusional in his deathbed. Because I remember hearing a story that when they dug up his grave, because the poor man was, like, buried in an unmarked grave, and then when they, like, came back later to, like, properly give him, like, a memorial, they fucking put the wrong date of birth on it, and then when they dug him up, I can't remember if it was to move him to the memorial site or for whatever reason to examine his body, but, like, they found a calcified something hard in his skull, and if it could have been a, calcified brain tumor. Um
Oh.
Hmm.
so that's out. That's why I think it was like some kind of brain lesion that that killed him because of the alcohol he was being forced to drink during the cooping
Mhm.
that night. Um,
And
yeah,
and if that's the case too, I mean, if cooping did happen, and if they threw him against, and if his head was hit correctly, like
Oof, yeah.
that could have
yeah,
spurred it.
yeah.
Like I've heard many cases where like, oh, they didn't know they had a tumor or something, but then they just hit their head just right, and that led to death.
That's it.
Hmm. The next question is about the stories themselves. We got one from Talos. Thank you, Talos. What do you think Poe was trying to accomplish by writing a murder mystery in which the murder can't really be guessed by the reader and has no logical motive?
It's supposed to vex you, perplex you, engage you, because what's how look at what we just talked about just now. Isn't a mystery more interesting when you're still trying to figure out how it works
Hmm.
to a degree?
I feel he was just like, "Hey, look how creative I can be. You can't guess what I'm gonna say." I feel like that's kind of what it was,
I
and that's
feel,
fine.
I think so too. And um, I know that like technically the first mystery ever written was one of the stories in A Thousand and One Arabian Nights, just like every other genre probably started from A Thousand and One Arabian Nights. Um,
Thanks, Scheherazade.
I gotta think of mysteries before Poe, and I can't really think of any other than A Thousand and One Arabian Nights. I mean, I think yeah, I think Sade's right. It's probably just him trying to be creative. I can't think of like any mysteries before that. Like even when I'm like thinking like, oh, there's that no, that
No, I mean there probably were, but we're just not super into it into that part
mm,
of fiction, American fiction, or even just fiction in general.
I think I
I mean,
yeah.
there's an air of mystery to most fiction when you think about it, because you're going to pick up details as you go. At least I find that stories are more compelling. Not when they're necessarily mystery driven, but you kind of start to figure out what's going on as time passes. If you want to keep the reader engaged, you should always leave a couple things unknown and then have stuff get revealed as the stresses. So, but this is different because, like I said earlier, it's funny that Talos asked this question because earlier I was just like, here's a mystery that if Dupont didn't explain you every minute detail, like you wouldn't get it
Hmm. No, absolutely.
because it's the most far fetched. It's an orangutan, and there happened to be this window with a broken nail, and yeah, it's just
Yeah, it feels like the skeleton for what would be a modern day detective story.
hmm.
I know the one thing I know about Poe, Poe has a love for twists. Let's not forget like I'm
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking of like the system of Dr. Tar and Professor Feathers,
Hmm.
or and that's a that has a twist, and then I'm going like I'm trying to go
The Black
through
Cat has a twist.
twist the
Mask of the Red Death twist.
yeah, he has he likes, but what if it's this? What if this happened? He kind of thinks a little out there at times. And I think this is another story where it's like that.
Even Fall of the House of Usher has kind of a twist.
Kind
Kinda.
of.
It's a little bit that's I think that's one of his most gothic stories, I'll
Oh,
be honest.
absolutely.
Absolutely his most gothic story.
Our next question is Fishmech, which is how influential does it still feel in light of modern detective mystery stories? In other words, do we still think it's influential now with the modern detective stories? So, for example, say you'd mentioned Knives Out. How and like do you think it that would be an influence for it today?
I mean, I think we kind of answered this already. At least I feel like I did in that this was the blueprint, and it was definitely had a domino effect on like our modern stories. In that we this is the detective revealing piece by piece how it all happened.
Well, like,
Um,
influential by proxy then.
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Because,
So
most people today, when you think of detectives, you think of Holmes, you think of Sam Spade, you think of Philip Marlowe, you think of, Eddie Valiant.
Yeah, Dupont is not a Dupont's not
At
a
least I
name
do.
that you often hear when someone's like, "Oh, name a
The
detective."
great detectives of fiction, you don't think of most people will
yeah,
not.
because I mean, do you think we would have gotten more stories with Dupont if Poe had lived longer? Like, because he didn't
Maybe.
really.
He was in, like, 3 stories, like, that I know of off the top of my head. Because there's The Purloined Letter, there's a direct sequel to Murders at the Rue Morgue, where Dupin solves yet another murder mystery. We might look at that one in the future just because I think it's one of the lesser known stories.
Hmm. I didn't know there was a sequel, but that's cool to know.
I will give you a title if that helps.
That would be cool.
So the sequel is called The Mystery of Marie Roget,
Oh, cool.
and it says specifically in the thing, a sequel to The Murders in the Rue Morgue. So that might be fun to visit someday. To look at that one and compare it to the Rue Morgue.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. In terms of writing between Edgar Allan Poe versus H.P. Lovecraft, I prefer Poe's writing to Lovecraft. Like both of them have great ideas, but Poe is not as repetitive. At least not intentionally repetitive. Like of course there's going to be repetitions in some of the stories, but when he does repetitions, it's meant to make a statement or
Right.
prove something or it's part of poetry. It's unlike H.P. Lovecraft where I feel like he's doing it because he's just trying to make it longer and
But yeah, honestly, fun read. Good times.
mhm.
Lots of dead women and angry orangutans.
Mhm. uh
Well, two dead women and one angry orangutan.
do we have any final words for this or
I have a few. I have a
all right.
couple. First off, the selected episodes of The Witching Hour will now be available on YouTube gradually as I upload them.
Yay!
Yay!
Woohoo!
Also, we are gonna bring back The Witching Hour for a limited time. Structure is going to be different. It's gonna be a little more loose, a little less planning. Mostly, I want to we're in some crazy times, pandemic, protests, a lot of changes in the world. And I want to at least provide people a distraction when they need to step away and cleanse, something to. I feel that helps. I rely on a lot of podcasts right now to do that myself. So if I can contribute to that, that's something I can do. Also, with the mention of protests, when this episode goes out, we'll have already done, I want to say, the first of many charity streams. But speaking on behalf of the rest of the creative horror family, I just want to vocally give our support to the Black Lives Matter movement. And we want all of our listeners to know that creative horror is a safe space for everyone,
Mhm.
especially for Black lives, for trans lives, LGBT. Like, you're safe here with us.
Absolutely.
Hells yeah.
We're about creative horror, not like real life horror. That's the thing we want to avoid as much as possible. So we
Yeah.
um
So, we're definitely going to try and do our part for the movement however that we can. And we hope that you will show support along with us. And we love you guys.
oh, that's wonderful.
And on that note, we decided for our next month's read, there are amazing Black writers out there, and they deserve to be heard from as well. And even though we're in a pandemic, and I know tried to do a public domain story to make it easier, I think in this case, it is worth the effort and it is worth the read. We've decided we're going to be reading The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval. You can find this book online as an ebook if you want to buy it. It's also found on your local libraries. There is an app called Libby where you can actually borrow ebooks.
Mhm.
It's been my favorite tool, especially for darkly lit. So I completely recommend it.
Yeah, definitely been relying on Libby since I can't physically go to my library right now. Also, if you are into audiobooks, I think for this one I'm actually going to listen to the audiobook because I was looking it up and the audiobook is read by Kevin R. Free, who is a talented and wonderful black voice actor and he does other things too. But if you are a Welcome to Night Vale fan, he voiced what was the other one's name?
Kevin.
His name
It's just
Kevin? It was
Kevin.
Kevin. Yeah, he voiced Kevin, who I fucking adored in Welcome to Night Vale and was the only reason I kept listening for a long time. Yeah, he voices the audiobook. So I've already bought it and I'm gonna start listening tonight.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. Oh man.
Yes. Okay. I didn't know that, and now I'm excited.
Yeah, I just pulled it up and I saw it and I was like, Kevin are free. Wait a goddamn minute.
Yep. 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 Okay, I think I'm gonna have to listen to the audiobook as well in that case, because welcome to Desert Bluffs, baby.
Oh, he my favorite line from all of Nightmare was reach your full productive potential, and that was literally like on sticky notes around my room forever because I'm a little obsessed about being productive, unhealthily so. But yeah, I love Kevin.
I would actually I mean I stopped listening to Night Vale, but
I
for
do
those
too.
for those
Me too.
who've never listened to Night Vale but are fans of horror, I would recommend listening from the beginning and
And then stopping when you feel like it.
yeah, exactly.
Stopping when the gimmick
Yeah,
starts to get kind of old.
But
Because at the beginning, in our opinion, it was very good and very compelling and very interesting. And then I don't know. For me personally, we could have a whole discussion about this another time. But
we
frankly,
could.
at a certain point, I think I just kind of fell off because the premise started to get kind of tired, in my opinion, or I just lost interest in the premise. But
It's a fun ride for
mhm.
as long as you can take it. And sometimes I do feel like, oh, maybe I should go back and just pick up where I left off. It's also the kind of show where I think you just jump back in wherever.
pretty much.
Um, I mean, I still have my Night Vale community radio mug where I keep a bunch of my pins and right here on my desk.
Plus, it showcases a lot of amazing queer LGBT voices of color. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and they also do have other podcasts that they run that are Into the Wire and the truck driving
Alice
girl.
isn't dead.
Yeah, those were fun to listen to. Rain Boy.
I think they did. Yes, they did Dream Boy.
That one's hella gay. Hella gay, guys. Go listen to that one. I liked it. I wish there was more, but yeah, okay.
Guys,
Okay, I'm done.
it's
I'm done. Plug's
hey,
done for me.
Hey,
Okay.
it's June. It's Pride Month. Let's
Yeah.
Also, happy Pride Month, listeners.
Yeah.
Woo! Okay.
Two of your hosts here are of the part of the LGBT community, so yeah, we love you guys.
Try and guess which ones.
Half of our creative family?
Yeah, about I would say half of us are.
No, more than half. 2/3.
Oh my goodness, yeah. That's yeah.
Anyway.
Well, on that positive note, do you think maybe we should blow out the candles and go find a copy of the Ballad of Black Tom?
I got mine. I'm ready.
Awesome. Let's just be careful. Like, make sure all the windows are locked because we don't want any crazy orangutans to get in.
Good evening, intrepid listeners. This is the Pasta Shade, the host of Midnight Marinara, and this podcast is part of CreativeHorror.com, a network of podcasts and creators working together to build a constructive community of horror fans. For more content like this, visit us at CreativeHorror.com.